The 1993 game is considered the start of the modern rivalry. BYU had won 19 of the previous 21 games after Lavelle Edwards took over the Cougar program. Before that, BYU's record against the Utes was 5-37-4. So obviously there were two extremes in the previous history of the rivalry. Ever since then, it's been far more competitive. And the 93 game was a classic. Two great offenses. Utah had quarterback Mike McCoy, running back Jamal Anderson. BYU had quarterback John Walsh. Each team was around 6-4 coming into the game, but again, the offenses were very prolific. And one of the most entertaining games in the rivalry's history unfolded that day. Mike McCoy threw for 434 yards. Jamal Anderson had to have his ankle fixed at halftime, but he ran for 146 yards. And the most amazing thing about this game is it probably should have ended in a tie. Now that seems funny to fans who realize that FBS football for the last 20 years has played an overtime system, but in 93, overtime was still 3 years away. And so as Utah mounted a last drive and came to a fourth down at the BYU 38-yard line, Coach Ron McBride faced a decision about whether to try to get a first down and get a little closer or to let Chris Yergensen try a field goal. And it's more true than folklore that Ron McBride had a kind of a funny relationship with his kickers. There would be examples later on in the rivalry in 98, for example, when Ryan Kaneshiro hit the right upright at Rice-Eccles Stadium and BYU escaped with a 2-point win. And Chris Yergensen was not known as a real consistent kicker, but when it came time to deliver that day, he absolutely did. He stood up and nailed the 55-yarder with 25 seconds left in the game, and it would have been good from 60 or 65 yards. And so the Utes got a 34-31 victory. It was their first win in Provo in 22 years. And Ron McBride, having been a Utah assistant in the 1970s, the latter part of the decade, and then on into the 80s, remembered some humbling moments when frankly he thought, and he was correct, that BYU ran up the score in Provo in 1977 in particular. So that was a huge personal breakthrough for him and absolutely the turning point of the rivalry.
I mean, honestly, what was going through my head was just keeping the form right. You know, I had missed a couple other kicks, so it was just do your thing. It wasn't even the distance. I was never worried about kicking 55. I think if we got out past 60, you know, I might think about it, you know, but 55 was definitely within my range, so it's more just do it, you know, don't overthink it, just do it. I guess in the kicker's mind, you know, you can always hit one that you think's good, but then from that distance, you know, 1 degree off here or there, until you see it, you know, taking its flight down the field. And yeah, I think Jason Jones, I think he jumped up a lot faster than I did, but I kind of wanted to wait a little bit, but yeah, it felt good. I didn't slip. I mean, by the end of the game, you know, the field was tore up and stuff, but everything else felt good, you know, with the plant. And the hold was perfect, and I never worried about guys blocking on the front side. I wasn't really a kicker that got balls blocked. I guess the big question was whether or not Mac was going to, you know, actually kick the ball. You know, I think the first thought, you know, that kind of hit me was like, yeah, that's a big one. You know, lots of guys you kind of have your memorable marks of, you know, 51, 52. You know, there's a lot of guys that get in there, but 55 and farther, so much has to go perfect to get a distance like that. And I was like, yeah, that was a big kick. And then the other memory I remember is just being able to go up and I think I went up and hugged Mac, and I was just like, yep, I think I said something like, I got one for you, or something like that. So right after the field goal, they called a penalty. And I was seriously sitting there, oh, no. You are not calling that back. I didn't want to go through all that and then move us back 5 or something like that. And I remember McCoy being out on the field and discussing something with the refs, and it turned out it was against BYU.
The story of the 1993 game doesn't quite end with Chris Yergensen's 55-yard field goal that gave the Utes a 34-31 victory. It was such a momentous road victory for Utah that the players naturally wanted to celebrate a little bit more and give themselves something to remember. So they came back to this north end zone when the game ended 25 seconds later and tried to tear down the goalposts. For a story I did 3 years ago on the 20th anniversary of the 93 game, Jamal Anderson, the great Utah running back, said he had absolutely no regrets about trying to do that for all the tough times they'd had against BYU going back over the previous 21 years. He was only there for one previous year himself, but he knew the history and he knew what it meant to Utah to win in Provo. And he thought the effort to try to take down those goalposts was well worth it. Similarly, Chad Lewis, BYU tight end at the time and now a Cougar administrator, told me that one of his proudest moments was leading several players back out from the locker room area over there in the southeast corner to keep the Utes from being able to tear down those goalposts. And he vividly remembers his brother Mike Lewis, who had played for the Utes and was wearing his red Letterman's jacket, standing in the end zone, ready to help Chad if it came to that, because he valued his brother's involvement in keeping those goalposts from going down as much or more of wanting to join in the Ute celebration. So it was quite a scene that unfolded after that game. It's probably a unique moment in any rivalry's history that the other team tried to tear down the home team's goalposts, but it just illustrates how much emotion was involved in Utah's victory. And ever since, it's been one of the most competitive rivalries in college football in terms of the closeness of the games. Now, Utah has dominated the rivalry during these past 20 years, which actually started a 3-game winning streak in 93, and now the Utes have a 5-game winning streak. But what has stayed constant is the emotion involved and how close the games are.